Immigrations and customs enforcement agents have been carrying raids all around this area where undocumented immigrants come to work by picking up tomatoes, strawberries, and other vegetables. And that's why many people have stopped coming to work because they're terrified of being detained.
According to government data, nearly 50 million Americans lack consistent access to food. Many depend on the charity of food banks.
You may not be a farmer, but if one day you walk into your familiar supermarket and realize food prices have suddenly skyrocketed, Walmart shelves are empty. At that moment, will you ask yourself, what is really happening to America? This is not a temporary glitch due to transportation or weather. It is a sign of a deep fracture in the foundation when those who quietly feed the entire nation are silently letting go. From Texas to Iowa, from California to Kansas, countless American farmers are abandoning their fields. And if you think that doesn't affect you, let us show you when American farmers stop producing 10 things will collapse right within your daily life. Watch closely and note that this information is compiled from statistical data and is not intended to defame any organization. Number 1, food prices soar. If you walked into a supermarket today and saw eggs priced at $9 a dozen, would you still buy them? And if beef rose by another $6 per pound, would you reconsider dinner altogether? Choices that were once simple are now becoming complex calculations for every household. Food prices are rising steadily each week, and what worries many people is that there's no sign of it stopping. According to the USDA report from June 2025, egg prices have increased by more than 14%, beef by over 10%, and milk by nearly 9% over the past year. With numbers like these, a family of 4 could be spending an extra $150 a month just to eat the same as before. What's troubling is that while prices climb, incomes remain almost unchanged. The BLS recorded an average wage increase of 3.9%, but for sectors like services, restaurants, or transportation, the increase hovers around only 1-2% or none at all. At this rate, every grocery trip becomes a silent trade-off between abundance and saving, between habit and reality. So what's happening? Why are prices rising so fast, and why are consumers increasingly helpless? The answer isn't found in the supermarket, but starts in places few people notice: the open fields of California, Texas, Iowa, where farmers are pulling back. They're not resting, they're retreating because they can't go on. Fertilizer prices have soared, fuel costs have surged, machinery lacks replacement parts. Seasonal labor is critically scarce, especially after large-scale immigration crackdowns. Many small farms are afraid to hire. Some have planted but had to abandon their fields mid-season because there was no one to harvest. When growers stop growing, the entire system behind them slows down. Slaughterhouses, processing plants, warehouses, and trucks can't operate normally. As a result, domestic supply contracts. And to fill that gap, the US has started importing more from Canada, Brazil, Argentina. But imports aren't cheaper. On the contrary, tariffs and logistics costs push consumer prices up by 30 to 50%. Not everyone can cope with this situation, especially those living on fixed incomes like the elderly or people working part-time or hourly jobs. When food prices rise faster than earnings, the first thing to disappear from the kitchen is choice. Dinner becomes about what you can buy, not what you want to eat. Another consequence, rising food prices don't just make meals more expensive, they shake the feeling of security. You used to know what you could cook on the weekend. Now you're not so sure. Eggs might be too expensive, vegetables might be missing, and meat might no longer be on the menu. Every shopping trip becomes a moment to reassess your life. What worries people most is that this may just be the tip of the iceberg, because if farmers have already left the fields, then price increases are just the beginning. Number 2, shortages and empty shelves. If you think rising prices are the worst part, try walking into Walmart, a place that used to have everything, and finding nothing to buy. Not because you can't afford it, but because the shelves are empty. Americans have long been accustomed to supermarkets overflowing with goods, stacked loaves of bread, trays of eggs, long rows of chilled milk. But now even Walmart, the symbol of abundance, can't guarantee that anymore. Basic staples like eggs, milk-bred vegetables have vanished from shelves not just for a day, but for weeks on end in some states. In Northern California, Florida, and North Carolina, many Walmart and Whole Foods stores are reporting no schedule for new deliveries. Shoppers only glance at each other, then push their carts in silence. Refrigerated aisles that used to be full now hold only a few wilted vegetables, few crates of water, and some abandoned goods. This is no longer a glitch. This is a prolonged breakdown where the supply chain from farm to supermarket has failed to reconnect. Behind this silence lies a chain of fractures that began in the fields. When farmers stop producing due to labor shortages, high costs, harsh policies, and fear of crackdowns, there's nothing left to harvest, process, or transport. And when distribution networks like UNFI, which supplies over 30,000 outlets, are crippled by cyber attacks like the one in June, even giants like Walmart begin to falter. Even delivery services can't save the day. Amazon Fresh, Walmart Plus, Instacart are all overloaded. Many people placed orders early in the week and still received nothing. Some turned to unofficial black markets on TikTok, Facebook, Craigslist, where eggs are listed at $14 per dozen, or milk is traded for toilet paper. No one imagined that in one of the most advanced high-tech nations in the world, people would return to barter like in one of America's darkest eras. In suburban and rural areas, it's even worse. It's not just a shortage of goods, but a lack of stores to go to. According to CNBC, in just the first half of 2025, over 150 stores, Target, Walgreens, Sprouts, have shut down mostly in low-income areas. When supermarkets disappear, people don't just lack food, they lack options and the hope that tomorrow will be different from today. And the most painful part is those hit hardest are the ones who can't drive around looking for where to buy. The elderly who don't drive. Workers without free time. Single mothers cooking breakfast with whatever's left in the pantry, not because they want to, but because there's no other choice. This isn't a movie scene. This is America in the summer of 2025, where even Walmart can no longer keep its promise of always in stock, where bread and eggs, simple, common, seemingly ever-present items have become luxuries, where having money no longer guarantees that you can eat enough. Number 3, health is suffering. Can you believe it? The health of millions of Americans is in a state of emergency, not because of an infectious pandemic, but because daily meals have become so poor in quality that they no longer provide the nutrients we need to stay healthy. As food prices surge and shelves go empty, the nutritional choices of many families are narrowing to alarming levels. Fresh meat, leafy greens, nutrient-rich milk are no longer readily available or are simply unaffordable. What's left are canned goods, frozen foods, instant noodles, and cheap cereals filling but lacking essential nutrients. According to Feeding America, by June 2025, the number of people relying on food banks had risen by more than 20%. But that figure isn't just about hunger. It signals a silent decline in the body at the cellular level. The CDC warns that vitamin D and iron deficiencies are rising rapidly among teenagers, leading to fatigue, loss of concentration, and weakened immunity. Many resident doctors report patients taking their medications properly, but still unable to control their conditions because they can no longer maintain the right diet. For diabetes, heart disease, kidney failure, one wrong meal renders the prescription ineffective. The consequences extend beyond the kitchen into hospitals. When patients arrive malnourished, recovery times lengthen and treatment costs increase. Meanwhile, hospitals themselves are struggling. Meal budgets have risen by over 30% in just half a year, forcing many facilities to replace fresh meat with frozen goods, reduce portions, and cut vegetables from long-term meal plans. A nurse in Arizona shared some post-surgery patients we can't provide them the protein we used to. But what's more upsetting than the calorie count is the loss of control. For the elderly, a complete meal isn't just nutrition, it's a symbol of autonomy. When they skip breakfast to save for lunch, when a prescription comes with the advice, try to eat more greens, but there are no vegetables left at the store, then health is no longer a personal choice. It's determined by what's left on the shelves. There's no epidemic yet. Illness is spreading, not through the air, but through deficient meals. A KFF study shows people living in prolonged food insecurity are more prone to mental health issues, anxiety, insomnia, especially elderly individuals living alone. Malnutrition doesn't arrive with noise. It creeps in silently through unintended weight loss, through dizziness when standing up, through lacking the energy for a full grocery run. And if today's meals can no longer sustain a sick person's recovery, what will happen to tomorrow's work? Number 4, widespread unemployment. For those who believe in the American dream, losing a job is not just losing income. It's losing the right to live as a person of worth. Only with a job can we dare dream of a small house, a decent meal, or simply buying a proper pair of shoes for our child to go to school. But in the summer of 2025, for many families in rural America, those things are becoming luxuries. When farmers no longer want to plant, every link that comes after them gradually breaks down. Farms shut down, processing plants have nothing to handle, trucks have nothing to carry. According to estimates from Iowa's Labor Department, over 5,000 jobs were lost in May alone, not just from farms, but from cold storage facilities, repair shops, food services, local schools, and hospitals. And that's just the surface. Because when jobs disappear, the consequences don't just show up on paychecks, they infiltrate the most basic of needs: what to eat, where to live, how to make it through the week. One person losing a farm job means their spouse quits working at the diner, their child has no school bus to ride their grandparents, have no one to take them to follow-up appointments. They cut off internet service, then phone plans, then even insurance. At some point, they have to choose between dinner and medication, and no one thought that could happen in America. Some people try to hang on, juggling 3 seasonal jobs just to get by. But with severe job shortages in agricultural areas, especially in Iowa, Nebraska, and North Dakota, not everyone can find work, even temporary. The rest begin to leave. USPS has reported a sharp rise in the number of households no longer receiving mail in many rural towns since the start of 2025, a silent signal of an unspoken exodus. And as people leave, those who stay behind begin to feel something more painful than unemployment invisibility. No one mentions them in the news. No aid reaches them in time. They lose their jobs, then their role in society. A man who once drove a truck distributing chicken now spends his days sitting on a park bench, staring at the factory across the street where he worked for 12 years, now covered in dust and locked shut. The American dream for them didn't explode in a crisis. It shattered piece by piece with every unpaid bill, every child who drops out of school, every empty mailbox. And the terrifying part is no one knows how that dream will be patched back together, or if it even can be. Number 5, real estate crisis. You just lost your job. Your hometown has no more fields and no one is hiring. You leave hoping to find something better in a small city, once seen as a second chance. But when you arrive, you realize you're not the only one with that idea. And what seemed like a safe haven is now a place with no room left. The housing crisis doesn't always start with blaring alarms. It quietly builds from streams of people leaving rural areas to seek work from years of supply shortages, from apartments that once felt like home, now bearing signs reading long-term lease only $1, $900 a month. According to Zillow estimates, nationwide rent rose about 3.5% in spring 2025, reaching nearly $2,000 a month. In labor-attracting areas like Midland or Odessa, projected increases reach 17%. At the same time, those who were once stable in small towns are starting to feel the squeeze. A new teacher or a retiree living on a fixed pension may have grown used to paying $1, $200 a month, but when the lease expires, that number suddenly jumps to $600. Many choose to retreat into cramped rooms, share spaces, even live in cars, or stay with relatives. And when a roof over your head becomes something to scramble for, peace also becomes hard to hold on to. The American dream was once tied to a house, even a small one, but your own. Yet now the gap between those who can buy and those who can only rent is wider than ever. Forecasts from Redfin suggest the national median home price may rise another 4% in 2025, while incomes lag behind. Housing is becoming more of an investment asset than a place to live as more people switch to short-term rentals, Airbnb, or keep homes vacant waiting for prices to climb. In this picture, renters grow vulnerable. They don't set the rent, and they can't choose a stable long-term home. Not only are prices rising, but living spaces are changing too. Small cities are now more crowded traffic, denser, and public services under strain. Schools are overloaded, hospitals are working overtime, even electricity, water, and garbage collection are affected. Some once quiet neighborhoods are now packed, and tension is silently building, not because anyone is at fault, but because no one prepared for this many people needing a place to live. There are also towns once labeled Zoom towns where city folks moved after the pandemic to take advantage of remote work. Housing prices in Bozeman, Montana, for instance, once rose by 37% in just 1 year. But now as the reverse wave hits rural populations flooding cities for survival, overcrowding is taking shape in a new form. Whether moving into or out of cities, everyone carries the same thing, a desire to live stably with a roof overhead. And when even that basic wish becomes a struggle, instability is no longer some distant concept. In the next part, we will see the very structures once considered social order, from community bonds to public safety, beginning to unravel. Number 6, the system unravels. A town once bustling with diners, libraries, and schools now hears only the wind sweeping through an empty parking lot. A tilted for-lease sign hangs in a dusty window. No natural disaster struck here, no dramatic crisis erupted. It all started with the fields. When farmers stop producing due to taxes, high input costs, labor shortages, or policy instability, every rhythm of life after them begins to stall. Farms shut down food supply chains, break prices rise. But the quieter and deeper consequence is the retreat of those who lived in these small communities. With no work left, no income to hold on, people leave. And when enough people leave, the whole system begins to crack apart. According to estimates from the Harty Center for Rural Health, nearly 50 rural hospitals closed across the U.S. in just the first half of 2025, a number climbing rapidly amid declining populations and shrinking local budgets. Hospitals lose patients, schools lose students, libraries lose readers, restaurants lose diners. No one is left to sustain the former pace of life, not even enough to stay open on weekends. Some counties in Kansas and Missouri have had to consolidate school districts, causing hundreds of teachers to lose their jobs. Students from one town now have to bus to another, a journey lasting over 40 minutes on roads once used only for hauling corn to the mill. Classes are merged, cafeteria portions are cut, and the library has been turned into an overflow classroom due to lack of space. Elsewhere in town, the local post office now only opens 3 days a week. The community center no longer operates after 6 p.m. The diner where 2 generations once shared weekly dinners now bears a sign reading indefinitely closed. No one declares the town dead, but everyone feels it's no longer the place that once made them feel they belonged. When there's no doctor to call, no school to take your child, to no neighbor to greet in the morning, the loss is no longer material. It's the loss of connection, the loss of meaning, and perhaps most worrying of all, the younger generation, those who grew up with warm memories of this place, aren't just leaving. They're no longer sure they ever want to come back. Number 7. The young generation loses faith, loses dreams. The fields are still there, but silent. No more sound of tractors, no more silhouettes walking at dawn. Not because the harvest failed, but because no young people remain to sow the seeds. In states that once formed the heart of American agriculture like Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas, more and more towns are facing a grim reality. The next generation is gradually disappearing. It's not that they've turned their backs on the land, but they no longer believe they can live off it. According to a recent USDA report, only about 9% of American farmers are under the age of 35. Meanwhile, the average age of farmers has surpassed 58 and continues to rise. Young people grow up in a world of rapid change. They witness their grandparents giving up farming due to labor shortages, their parents burdened by the costs of fuel fertilizer and land taxes. They hear much about technology startups, remote work, but no one speaks of returning to raise cattle, grow rice as a dream worth pursuing. When adults have yet to build a clear path, young people are forced to choose the easier way, move to the city, work in factories, or, if they can, head to Canada, where agricultural policies are considered more open and friendly. The concern lies not only in the low numbers, it's in the fact that the system surrounding agriculture is fading as the young leave. High schools drop farming classes, universities cut down agricultural programs, seasonal fairs training farms, and model farm programs are seeing fewer participants. When no young hands touch the soil, the land itself loses its chance to be part of the future. Many reports from NASS show that fewer than 1 in 5 young farmers gain access to favorable loans or agricultural startup support. No capital, no successful models to follow, no mentors. And no matter how strong the passion is, it struggles to survive. So now many who once grew up with the land are working in warehouses, driving delivery trucks. At the same time, many rural areas are gradually losing their identity. Places that once held harvest festivals, once bustled with weekend farmers markets, now sit cold and empty. Some towns in Iowa and Ohio are warned of becoming ghost towns if this trend continues. Without young successors, without new families moving in, without harvests to celebrate, local identities too begin to fade. This story isn't just about rural folks. Because if there's no younger generation to continue farming, America won't just lack food, it will lack the ability to feed itself. Number 8. Losing position, living on US soil, eating from neighboring Canada. What if one day you walked into a supermarket in Kansas and 80% of what's on the shelves, from flour and dry beans to cooking oil, carried the label product of Canada? Not because you've moved, but because America, once an agricultural powerhouse, is gradually becoming a customer dependent on its northern neighbor. That scenario just a few years ago seemed unthinkable, but as waves of American farmers abandon their land due to rising production costs, labor shortages, and increasingly harsh weather, the balance is visibly shifting. According to the USDA, U.S. wheat output for the 2024-25 season continues to decline. Meanwhile, Canada, supported by warming climate and smart farming technology, has increased production to 34 million tons, nearly 8% higher than the 5-year average. Not just wheat, canola oil beans, and grains, all are flowing from Canada into the US, making up over 20% of total agricultural imports. And there's little barrier to stop this flow, as the USMCA agreement has removed almost all tariffs. This isn't wrong from a trade perspective, but there's a bitter irony for Americans, especially those who once lived off the land you're living on, soil that once fed the world, but now you rely on meals from across the border. What's worse, while American farmers struggle with skyrocketing fertilizer prices due to tariffs on imports from Canada, Canadian goods, grown with cheaper fertilizer, return to the US, cheaper and more accessible. cruel cycle, the more protectionism at home, the harder it is for local farmers to compete with their neighbors. Canada is doing nothing wrong. They're simply seizing the opportunity, heavily investing in agri-AI automation and sustainable techniques. Meanwhile, the US remains stuck in trade disputes, half-hearted subsidies, and a generation of farmers abandoning the fields. And so every inch of abandoned farmland in Central America unintentionally paves the way for Canadian produce to flood in. Consumers opt for cheaper products. Who can blame them? But in the long term, the fear isn't just about losing in trade. It's about gradually losing control over the most essential thing, food. And while Canadian farmers have long-term export contracts with Asia, American farmers are waiting on emergency aid. When the bread you eat each morning no longer comes from Kansas, but from Saskatchewan, the question isn't just, has America lost its standing? It's how much longer can we stay self-sufficient? Number 9. The collapse of a culture and its symbols. Do you remember the last time you bit into a rich piece of grilled beef? The kind of Texas beef famous worldwide, once a symbol of strength, pride, and true American spirit. These seemingly ordinary but symbolic things are quietly fading, not because they're outdated, but because no one is keeping the fire alive. When farmers abandon the land, it's not just about food scarcity. The culture of living off the land, living together, also begins to fracture. A small town in Kansas once held harvest festivals for 84 consecutive years. This year, the hall is silent. The last organizer has left. Young farmers are no longer staying, schools have closed, and the fairground is now overgrown with weeds. According to a survey by the University of Missouri in early 2025, over 70% of rural residents say they feel their communities are losing their identity. That's not just a feeling. It's a reality when there are no more weekend markets, no familiar old lady selling eggs, no backyard wood-fired ovens. The cultural memories once anchoring generations fade day by day. Data from the USDA shows that the number of small family farms has dropped by more than 30% in a decade. Many homes that once lit up early each morning to milk cows, check the fields, are now cold and empty. Children no longer grow up to the sound of roosters, but to the sound of TVs in urban apartments. The kids who once followed their dads into the fields now only know supermarket chains, packaged foods, and the story of homemade bread becomes a fairy tale. Of course, culture can change. But the issue is, what's disappearing isn't convenience, but memory. The emotional foundation that ties people to the land to each other. When you no longer know who raised the meat, you no longer chat weekly with your egg vendor, you lose a part of yourself. The part that lives slowly, genuinely with roots. And if you lived through the era when Texas beef wasn't just a dish, but a declaration of American spirit, that feeling is hard to describe. No one erases culture with a single blow. It disintegrates quietly, meal by meal, empty home by empty home, unheld fare by unheld fare. And one day when you pass through a town that was once your hometown, once filled with the scent of grilled meat, fresh bread, and children's laughter, you'll suddenly see nothing left but the name lingering on the map. Culture in the end doesn't disappear by proclamation. It disappears when no one's left to live and preserve it. Number 10. Other industries falter when the economy loses its backbone. When farmers no longer want to cultivate, the consequences go beyond food prices or empty grocery baskets. A range of industries from logistics, technology, and finance to education begins to falter. And when that happens, you don't have to be in agriculture to feel it. The economy you live in is more fragile than you think. Without vegetables, meat, and dairy from farms, processing plants are forced to cut back operations. Several major facilities in the Midwest, according to reports from AgriPulse and Reuters, confirmed reductions in capacity during Q1-2 of 2025 due to a lack of raw materials. When factories don't run, truck drivers lose jobs, gas stations lose revenue, and distribution centers become deserted. The slowdown begins at the first step, and its impact ripples far and wide. The logistics sector, which is the backbone of goods transportation, is affected in a domino effect. Seaports report many containers waiting idle due to a lack of goods for export. Trucks, cargo ships, cold storage systems all are partially paralyzed, increasing costs and slowing down the entire supply chain. In several coastal states, small transport businesses have temporarily halted services due to insufficient freight to sustain regular operations. Next comes the banking and agricultural insurance industries. When farmers stop borrowing and stop cultivating, existing loans begin to turn into bad debt. Revenue from crop insurance declines as fewer people qualify to participate. Some rural credit institutions have reported a significant increase in loan rejection rates compared to the previous year. The ripple effects also extend to education and technology. agricultural universities lose their practical ties. Training programs on cultivation techniques and farm practice are no longer held regularly due to a lack of local collaborators. At the same time, many startups in the agri-tech sector, which rely on small and medium farms, have had to pause product rollouts or lay off staff. Even fields that seem unrelated, like agritourism or regional culinary services, are struggling. When harvest festivals are no longer held and visitor numbers drop, rural hotels and specialty shops also lose significant income. Many localities that once considered rural experience as a core tourism product now have to revise their short-term economic plans. Data from Boston Consulting Group in 2025 shows that if the agricultural production chain is not reinvested to adapt to climate and labor fluctuations, the productivity of 15 major crops could decline by 12–35% by mid-century. This means the impact will not stop at a domestic level but will affect the entire global value chain. And that's why even if you work in a field seemingly unrelated to agriculture, such as banking, logistics, education, or technology, you're still being directly affected. No storm or financial crisis is needed to disrupt everything. It only takes farmers stepping away from the fields, and each small gear will begin to stop turning. Eventually, the whole system could come to a standstill. If one day American farmers stop producing, then it's not just about empty fields, but a quiet upheaval reaching into every corner of our everyday lives. From the simple daily meal to jobs, schools, hospitals, even the dreams of the younger generation. They don't ask to be glorified. They just need enough support to keep farming, to have a reason to stay with the land that has raised not just one family, but an entire nation. So this is not just a story about food, but a story about connection, self-reliance, and the identity of America. We need to do something before we lose more than we can imagine, before a way of life disappears, before a profession is left without successors, and before a nation must look back at its roots in regret. Please note that this video does not promote division. All content is presented with the intent to explore, analyze, and spark discussion based on current events, emotions, and societal trends.